Of Stellantis in Canada in the House of Commons this afternoon as the Carney government is being urged by the opposition to release contracts. The feds have said they are considering legal action if the automaker doesn't keep its commitment to its Brampton plant after moving production of the Jeep Compass to the United States. Meanwhile, on the trade front, the feds are hopeful to have some movement on steel and aluminum tariffs this week ahead of the Prime Minister's trip to Asia. Let's bring back our front bench, Brian Gallant, Lisa Ray, Tom Mulcair, and Rob Benzie. Lisa, I will start with you on this one. What are your thoughts on how transparent the government in this moment needs to be about whatever arrangement exists with Stellantis?
I think the government has to be very, very careful, because if you think this is the last one we're going to encounter, then you are kidding yourself. Donald Trump has made it extremely clear that he does not believe that any car should be assembled in Canada, especially ones that are being sold into the United States. He's made it clear not only to us as a country, he's made it clear to the auto parts manufacturers and to the auto assemblers as well. And they're responding. They're moving their production to the United States. And I don't see any stoppage of that. I see a lot of concern about it. I think that makes a lot of sense. But at the end of the day, it's a train that's moving in one direction fairly fast. So to say this, it's tough for a minister to stand up and say that we're going to guarantee that every job is going to stay here. The Conservatives are doing the job they're supposed to do, which is you should have known this was going to happen. You offered them $15 billion. How can you tell us that you haven't guaranteed a job? Where did this money go? And it's going to happen over and over again, Vashi, until, we have some kind of conclusion on this auto mess that we're currently living in. And I really do hope that we have steel and aluminum tariffs sorted out and that they're able to actually execute on yet another promise that they're making ahead of time. Why do they keep making these promises before they actually have the stuff in writing? That's a concern for me as well, because it kills people's appetite for investment in the country, especially when you say we're going to deliver and then we don't.
The sort of added layer here, Benzie, and it involves the Ontario government as well, as Lisa's comments allude to, it reflects the fact that just a few short years ago, both of the federal government under then Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and Premier Ford's government in Ontario decided to go all in on, as a response in part to the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act in the States, on EVs and EV parts, and put up a bunch of, taxpayer money to essentially try and lure these companies to Canada. And I remember at the time we were told, it's inevitable. We got to do this or else we're out of the game. This is the future. Now, lo and behold, everything is being flipped on its head all these number of months and in some cases years later, and we have an exodus of the industry, as Lisa said, the beginning of what is surely to be, I think, an exodus of more of these companies out of Canada. What does that require of our political leaders who made those decisions in the first place?
I mean, actually, Premier Doug Ford's Progressive Conservatives and Trudeau's Liberals made a bet, and they bet on EVs, and they bet on now, one thing we should clarify is it's not $15 billion in taxpayers' money that's going out the door. The money that these companies will get is based on what they produce, their production credits. So if they produce billions and billions of dollars worth of batteries, then they get money, and it's important to note that. But to be fair to Mr. Poilievre, he was consistent. He didn't like this when it was going out the door, and it's a source. One of the reasons that Doug Ford doesn't like Pierre Poilievre and that the federal Conservatives and the provincial Progressive Conservatives are not quite at war, but certainly not friendly, is because of the federal Tories' stance on EVs. Remember, Mr. Trudeau at the Volkswagen Giga plant that's opening in St. Thomas, the third largest building in the world, the Tory MP was there. The local MP at the time was there, and she was there against the wishes of the leader. Didn't want her there at a thing in her own riding. That's how strongly the federal Tories felt about this. The provincial Tories here in Ontario, they feel they're simpatical with the federal Liberals on EV subsidies. They've made a bet. Now, I don't think it's over yet. I think that this the Windsor Stellantis stuff is still in play. The Volkswagen EV factory in St. Thomas is still going ahead. But it's a huge setback. It's just, how much more chaos can Trump cause for our country's economy? And I think there's going to be a couple of years more of chaotic years, unfortunately.
Yeah, almost a dangerous question at this point to ask. Brian, At the same time, this Prime Minister Carney-led government is now saying we have a new industrial policy. I don't really understand it. There's three points that we don't have all the details. But I did hear in the speech that the industry minister made, her specifically reference, companies don't just want subsidies. They seem to be at least rhetorically reflecting like a pushback from the private sector on picking winners or losers. Do you think that they will internalize that and that will actually be the way they approach industrial policy or economic growth moving forward? Or do you think they're wedded to this idea of winners and losers?
Right. It's an interesting question in the sense that I think we're seeing the politics of trying to make investments, try to lure investment, I should say, through kind of subsidies, through some of these, as Benzie mentioned, some performance type benefits as well to companies that are making investments, creating jobs, whatever it might be, that the different types of deals would outline. We're seeing the political risk and the politics of it, right? If it doesn't work, it can be very, very damaging. It can be very difficult. Lisa's right. Poilievre's doing what he's supposed to do as the leader of the opposition, and certainly from a political point of view, basically asking these questions. And it's hard for government to be able to answer because the politics aren't great, but also there's commercial data in the responses that you would like to give, right? And you can't share that. You'd like to be able to say some things that you're not necessarily able to be as transparent about that you would like because they are a part of a contract that are commercial in nature. So it can become very difficult. It also may be, and I don't know this to be the case, but I certainly have lived it and we've seen it. They may have something that they know is going to be announced by the company and they can't say it yet or for whatever reason. So these positions and circumstances are very tough politically when they don't work out. Now, when they work out, they can be very positive, and it looks like the government has taken direct action and helped create economic opportunity, but the risks are pretty high. So to your question, I think governments are pretty risk averse in general. And look, I think there's some pros and cons to that. And one of the things that means is that they don't really love doing these types of agreements. Now, the Trudeau government did a whole whopper of them, huge ones. So the political risk now maybe lays with the kind of Carney administration, if we call it. But certainly I think you're going to see the language that you mentioned a little bit more moving forward, not only because there's political risk and we're living that now, but also because they're going to want to find ways to just build up the industrial base in Canada. And really what that's going to be looking, I think, at is trying to find ways to give contracts to Canadian companies or at least companies that are anchored here in Canada so we can build up our capacity domestically.
And maybe also I'd look to the budget, Tom, to see if there are changes in policy that might create an environment that doesn't, that isn't just giving companies handouts to come here. And I understand the competitive environment, the commercial sensitivity, but there were questions at the time. And I remember the pushback from both levels of government at the province and the federal level, like, this is going to work out. Like, basically, don't you worry about what the details are. And here we are a few years later with 3,000 people in Brampton pretty worried.
Yeah, I think it goes to an essential proposition that everybody understands. Governments aren't very good at picking winners in a free economy. And that's the basic problem here. What's happening, of course, is there's a guy named Donald Trump and his sidekick, Howard Lutnick, who've upset the world order on trade. So we've got to start reacting differently. BC, forestry, huge industry, they'll make it through. It's going to be tough. They'll make it through. Quebec, aluminum, huge industry. They'll make it through. The Americans don't have enough aluminum. They'll make it through. I'm with Lisa on this one. Automakers, the automobile manufacturing sector as a whole is so huge to the Canadian economy. If it continues like this, that will have a determining effect on all of the country. And, one plant in one city, 3,000 direct jobs, 3,000 families without a livelihood potentially, but then everything else in a ripple effect, all the indirect jobs. That's one factory, and there are many. So it is a huge concern as they're negotiating right now in the United States. This has to be top of mind, but it wasn't. Lutnick was directly saying, Lisa's right, her quote is right. Lutnick is clear as a bell. They're going after the Canadian automobile industry as a whole. And I think we've got to be lucid about what that means to us. We keep talking about Trump and the effect of this. This is huge. This is the big one. Automobile is the big one. And I think that, you're right, Vashti. I mean, let's hope that there's something in the budget. But let's hope that there's not something in the budget that goes back to the old game of the government trying to pick who the winners are in a free market. That's been proven to be a huge mistake. Benzie was talking about the plants that are still on tap in Ontario for the electric vehicles. I hope that turns out to be true. But it goes back to an interview you had, Vashi, with the Chinese ambassador. Why are we still imposing 100% tariffs on Chinese electric vehicles to please the Americans when they're doing their darndest to destroy our automobile industry? I haven't heard a convincing answer to that one yet.
And I'll leave it on that question. Thanks, everyone. Appreciate the discussion. Our wonderful Monday front bench, Brian Gallant, Lisa Raitt, Tom Mulcair.